Hi, I'm Lemeshko, a Toronto-based CG artist with experience in the VFX, animation, and game dev industries since 2003. Most recently, I have had the privilege of working with Sinking Ship Entertainment, a Canadian company specializing in kids live action, CGI blended, and animation series. When I joined, the studio was in the process of developing an Unreal Engine pipeline for Builder Brothers Dream Factory. This is a 3D fully animated show created in partnership with Scott Brothers Entertainment. My role was to build a set of non-destructive tools using Houdini and Unreal for offline and real-time projects. These tools were specifically designed for procedural terrain generation and hierarchical scattering. They also allowed for manual editing of action areas. The primary objective of these tools was to empower a small team of artists to generate approximately 80% of the environments procedurally, with the remaining 20% being manually created. So the show was set in a variety of locations. With the power of procedural generation and non-destructive nature of the Houdini tools, a handful of artists were able to iterate quickly and achieve the desired look based on the art director's feedback. Here is a quick demonstration of the tools at work, utilizing Quixel Megascans assets within the Unreal Engine. I start by sculpting the terrain, then applying some minor erosion and generating procedural masks with the Houdini tool. These masks define the materials and asset locations. Next, I manually place large cliffs and procedurally scatter rocks and vegetation based on the masks and hierarchical rules of the Houdini tool. The trees affect the landscape height for better blending into the terrain. I then clear and flatten an area based on the spline and place a few assets by hand. After that, I blend the tree with the terrain using the Houdini tool. With just 3 grass blades, I generate a small area of grass field around the tree based on the spline and the Houdini tool's grass clumping option. This could be an effective solution for hero areas where precision is important to avoid grass penetrating the scene elements. Even with a limited number of assets, I was able to create a rather detailed environment. One of the key features of the tools is the generation of procedural landscapes and masks. These masks can be based on terrain features such as slope, curvature, flow, height, occlusion, etc. Additionally, these masks can be utilized for scattering and materials. In this example, I start by using the height noise as the foundation, then apply distortion, erosion, more distortion, additional mid-frequency noise, slump, and high-frequency noise. Now I'm able to extract masks for flow, slope, occlusion, curvature, and user-defined direction. We also have the capability to generate masks and height data based on splines, spline patches, meshes, images, as well as procedurally and hand-placed assets. For instance, I'm using a spline to create a sign distance field mask, which I'm adding to the height and then incorporating some noise based on that mask. Afterward, I'm converting it into a solid mask with some expansion and blur. Now it can be used for erosion, extra noise, and slump. The tools enable us to extract as a mesh, and just by duplicating the same mesh, moving, rotating, and scaling, we can achieve more terrain variety. Then we can project the result onto the landscape and modify it further, like adding more details with the Houdini tool post-processing options. We can also bake it into an image stamp and use it as the height stamps with different options. Multiple splines in the spline patch mode can be used as a control grid to modify height data. This could be useful for defining the base shape. Procedurally scattered assets could also affect mask and height data, as well as hand-placed assets. Once we've generated masks and height data or obtained them from the projection, we can further manipulate them using a variety of operations, blending modes, ramps, and so forth. To give you a brief illustration, I'm using a spline's outer sign distance field option to displace the landscape. Then I'm adding noise, distortion, and some large cracks, which I then smooth out. To integrate this cabin into the scene, I'm raising the ground to its foundation and applying some noise, distortion, and erosion. We have the ability to extract the water surface from the mask and spline, where the flow direction is determined by the incline of the spline. This can be utilized as the flow speed and direction in the water material. As demonstrated in this example, I'm using the splines to displace the waterbed, then adding some details with the post-processing. Then, based on the waterbed mask and spline, we can extract the water surface where the brighter color indicates the flow speed and the UV attribute contains the 2D direction. The scattering tool enables us to construct a hierarchy with various complexity logics to cater to a wide range of production needs. It can be based on any combination of parametric rules, masks, splines, meshes, as well as procedurally and hand-placed assets. In this example, I'm using a specific height range mask with an inner sign distance field option to scatter some trees. Then I'm masking that with a spline, and with another spline I'm clearing the path. The tools powered by the Houdini engine enable us to bring the non-destructive nature of Houdini into Unreal. This is an invaluable benefit for small team environments and assists directors in iterating on their vision much faster to achieve the desired look. Unreal users don't need to know Houdini. The entire process, including creating hierarchical scattering recipes, can be done without opening Houdini. In our workflow, we only use two tools that can interact with each other in various ways. To work in Unreal, it requires a valid Houdini engine or Houdini license and installation. Also, a Houdini engine for Unreal plugin. It's important to note that we will be utilizing only the free Houdini for Unreal rental license while working in Unreal. This means we have a privilege to use the tools in Unreal without actually using Houdini or Houdini engine license. So what is a Houdini engine? It's a non-graphical Houdini, part of Houdini distro, requires a paid Houdini license or Houdini engine rental license. It's a solution for batch processing and distributing important tasks on the farm. On the other hand, Houdini engine for Unreal, it's a plugin for Unreal Engine, brings procedural power of Houdini to Unreal Engine, comes with Houdini distro and works if Houdini installation exists, and requires a free rental license. Our workflow consists of three main steps: generate or sculpt the landscape height, generate or extract masks for scattering and landscape material, and perform scattering. There are multiple ways to generate landscape with height and masks HDA. We can begin by sculpting the base terrain, or generating noise, projecting meshes, splines, patches, images, and then applying a series of post-processing operations on top. However, on the Builder Brothers project, we typically modeled or sculpted the base terrain in the DCC tool of the artist's choice, and then added post-processing operations if required. Here is an example. We start with the base sculpted terrain and then add a series of effects to introduce more details. After that, we can generate masks based on specific features or noise. These masks can be used later for scattering assets and defining the landscape material layers. For example, an erosion mask could be used for removing or spawning specific assets and applying a material to achieve the desired look. Occlusion could also help to separate wet areas. The slope mask helps to identify cliff or hill areas. Curvature can help to break up the look and add more details. The user-defined direction could help to separate north from south areas where the south would be drier than the north. The height gradient mask could be used to separate high altitude areas from low ones, and used for assigning different materials based on that, or spawn specific assets related to that height. A noise mask could help to get material and asset scattering variety. However, these masks are not that useful without the ability to edit and post-process them. The masks can be further altered by adjusting, combining, or mixing with each other to achieve a desired look. Here is a simple example. I'm projecting the mask from a spline, expanding, blurring, distorting, and subtracting it from the height gradient mask. For each mask and height, we can add as many operations as we need. It works in the similar way to Photoshop Smart Filters. We can stack as many as we need to meet the requirements. We can also apply any mask to the height. The list of operations is extensive to ensure that it doesn't limit the artist's creativity. In Unreal, the mask and height data are stored in the landscape layers. This means that the Enable Edit Layers checkbox must be activated. This is one of the main distinctions when using the tool in Unreal as opposed to Houdini. The landscape layers provide us with an additional option to benefit from Unreal's layering system. Once the terrain and masks are prepared, it's time to populate the landscape with assets using the hierarchical scattering HDA based on our recipe. The HDA is heavily inspired by two presentations: Procedural World Generation of Far Cry 5 from GDC 2018 and Ghost Recon Building Worlds with Houdini from Houdini Hive. I highly recommend checking them out. The logic of hierarchical scattering is determined by 5 parameters: mask priority, layer ID, order ID, local and global radius. These parameters were sufficient to achieve fairly complex results. The mask priority parameter allows us to determine which asset should spawn when multiple mask areas overlap. In this example, the mask priority for the green asset is set to 0, and for the red asset it's set to 1. As a result, the red asset will appear in the green mask area due to their higher mask priority value. The layer and order ID parameters come into play when we have more than one asset to scatter. These parameters determine whether the assets should use a local or global radius area to resolve overlapping assets. The key difference is that layer ID is used for incoming assets when we chain multiple hierarchical scattering HDAs, and order ID is used for asset variants in the current HDA. By using layer ID or order ID and 2 radius parameters, we can replicate a common natural hierarchy. For instance, the local radius allows us to define a tree canopy radius, and the global radius defines the radius of a trunk, allowing grass or bushes to grow under the canopy. Here is an example. We scatter only one asset and adjust just the local radius parameter, which is represented in red. As you can see, when the circles overlap enough, the asset disappears. In this scenario, I have 2 assets scattered with 2 HDAs. The pine tree was scattered first and has layer ID set to 0, and the bush was scattered second and it's set to 1. The green circles represent the global radius parameter, and as you can see, only the bushes are disappearing, and the pine trees are not affected. If the layer ID were set to 0 or 1 for both assets, then the global radius wouldn't have any effect, and the tool would treat them as assets on the same hierarchical level. The local radius would control the removal of both assets overlapping. In this case, I have both assets scattered in one HDA as asset variants, and I have order ID set to 0 for bushes and 1 for pine trees. As you can see, the global radius on the bushes is now affecting only the pine trees. The order ID value lets the tool know which asset is higher in the scattering hierarchy level and which is lower. There are other parameters that I'd like to briefly mention. These include coverage or total count of assets to scatter, relax iterations, scale by mask and ramp, random scale between min and max values, density distribution based on mask and ramp, align to surface normal, global rotation, random rotation between min and max values, global translation, and random translation between min and max values. The deformation mask parameters allows us to deform the terrain and offset the assets. Also provides the mask for material assignment. Not all assets can be scaled significantly due to the textile density issues that come with scaling, and also, for instance, the shape of a tree changes over its lifespan. The tool allows us to specify as many sizes or edges of the tree as needed. In this example, I'm using 3 different sizes for the pine tree. If we use the size by mask feature, the tool will pick the appropriate size of the tree based on the gradient value of the mask. To avoid the staircasing pattern, we can use the blend sizes parameter. This helps compensate for the lack of intermediate sizes. Additionally, size randomization can help to break up the uniform look. Each size of the asset can have multiple variants. The weight parameter controls the scattering percentage of each variant. In this example, I'm increasing the weight of the dead pine trees, specifically for the largest pine tree size. Here I'm adjusting the weight for the medium-sized dead tree variant. The red color represents the local radius parameter, which is used to remove the largest trees that are too close to each other. The green color represents the global radius for the medium-sized dead tree variant. As you can see, it removes all other sizes of the pine tree along with its variants because the order ID is set to a lower value than the rest. This gives us full control over each variant in the hierarchy. When you are tasked with covering a large area with grass, it's beneficial to use a smaller number of scattered assets for the sake of performance. Typically, we would use large grass clumps for this purpose. However, this method can present some challenges. Large grass clumps may not properly conform to the curvature of the terrain surface. This isn't the issue for long shots where the grass is far from the camera, but it becomes noticeable in close-up shots. Furthermore, large clumps can't follow detailed exclusion masks or assets. For instance, a grass clump might penetrate the rails, making the grass visible outside of the terrain surface plane. A potential solution is to use smaller grass clumps that lean in one direction in high detailed areas. We can also use a sign distance field exclusion mask from the rails to guide the grass away from them. However, this could result in a uniform look. While we could use a noise mask to add some noise-based scale variance, it might still look unappealing. Aligning the grass to the surface normal can help in areas where the surface isn't flat. For better look, we can use cellular noise to affect the scale and direction. We can skip cells with a ramp and randomize values, then blur it to remove sharp edges and add some distortion. With some extra direction blending settings, we can achieve a more interesting look for the grass. Blending with the surface normal direction can also be beneficial. Now the grass nicely avoids the rails and doesn't look uniform anymore. I think this approach provides a more natural and visually pleasing result. Furthermore, the tool enables spline-based scattering. This feature allows us to control various aspects of the asset on the curve. We can adjust the density, spread, and overlap of the assets. We also have control over randomness and ramp-based size of the assets. The results can then be projected on the surface. This includes alignment to the surface normal, as well as random rotation and direction. This level of control provides a high degree of flexibility and precision. It's a powerful tool for creating complex and detailed environments. Alright, that wraps it up. I really hope you found this helpful and learned something new. A big shout out to James Wallace, Matt Bishop, Fiona Wong, and the folks at Side Effects for making this presentation happen. Cheers!